Hey everybody, it's Damien from Guitar Journey once again, and today I want to share with you two cool ways to make your playing sound more expressive, more melodic, and more purposeful. You know, when we're improvising, doing a guitar lead or a guitar solo, whatever you want to call it, we always kind of have to guard against a couple of things. One is we need to be on guard against just kind of noodling around without any sense of direction or sense of purpose to our lead. Because in truth, a good solo should have a direction to it. It should almost be like a story with a certain arc to it, okay? I like to think of a solo as a composition within a composition, a song within a song. So we definitely need a sense of purpose and direction and intent in our solos, okay? Now, not only do we have to avoid falling into the habit of just noodling around, but we also have to avoid just playing our own go-to licks too often. And to be clear, there's nothing wrong with playing certain set licks with which you're comfortable. We all do that. We all have sort of our own vocabulary, our own musical cliches that we fall back on. But we can't just play those. Because even if they're really, really cool licks, sooner or later, if we use them too much, it gets a little dull, a little repetitive. So we need to work on ways to break out of playing the same old licks. Now, the two ways I'm going to show you today, two ways of adding intent and purpose and variety to your leads are as follows. First, we're going to work on building what is called a motif, M-O-T-I-F, motif. And second, we're going to work on using wide interval leaps within our scales. Okay? Now, in truth, I could probably do a complete video on each of these topics in order to really explore them completely and thoroughly and deeply. But to me, there's actually some overlap between the two ideas. So at least in terms of giving a really workable introduction, I think it makes sense to cover them both in the same video. Okay? So let's get started with the idea of a motif. Okay? What is a motif? A really simple, workable definition is that a motif is just a musical idea that repeats. So we could have a melodic motif, or we could have a rhythmic motif, or even a harmonic motif. That is a motif based on harmony, certain chords, motion of chords, and so forth. Today I'm going to stick with a melodic motif, as I think that's the one that's the most easily recognized and the easiest one for me to give examples of. So the idea, again, is just come up with a short musical phrase and repeat it as the chords over which you're soloing change. As you repeat the motif, you can vary it somewhat. You can develop it. You can alter the rhythm a little bit if you want to. You can add in or maybe even subtract a few notes here or there. Maybe play the motif, the short musical phrase, in a different octave, that kind of thing. So for example, I'm going to put on a really simple backing track of a pretty ordinary, very commonly played chord sequence in the key of A minor. It's going to be A minor to F to C to G. A minor, F, C, G. Two measures of each chord, very straightforward, very vanilla. And I'm going to orient myself in an A minor scale. I'm going to use a diatonic scale here. And A minor here at the 5th fret. So the scale looks like this. We're going... Okay, that's my A minor diatonic scale. Okay, play it again. I could do a slightly different fingering. Same scale, of course. Now I'm going to develop my motif, my short, simple melody, right within this scale. And here's my basic motif I'm going to do. The notes are B, C, B, A, okay? And maybe I'll throw a G in there as well. Maybe I'll go B, C, B, G, A, like that. Okay? Very, very simple. But like I said before, when we play over the backing track, that is to say, when we play over a chord sequence, the melody becomes a little more interesting, a little more vibrant, because the chords underneath that very simple motif are changing. So to get us started, I'm going to play really, really simply so you can hear how the motif sounds over the chords in the sequence. Then listen for how I develop the melody. Listen for how I develop the motif. I adjust it, I add notes, I subtract notes, whatever, play it up an octave and so forth, as I just mentioned a moment ago, okay? So here goes with my very simple melody, my very simple motif over my very simple A minor chord sequence. Okay, as you can see, I started off with that very, very simple melody, really just 4 different notes, B, C, G, and A. But it took on a little bit of a life of its own because the chords underneath were changing. And I sort of adjusted a few notes to work with the different chords as the chords changed. And then I started repeating the melody up an octave, and that made things a little bit more interesting. And finally, I started throwing in some additional really short licks between the notes of the actual motif, or between the statement, the iterations of the actual motif. Okay? Now, to be clear, I want to be very clear about this. You wouldn't just do a single motif for your entire guitar solo and call it a day, right? We're not going to do that. I mean, that could work in a very, very short solo, but anything more than 8 measures, and that's going to get really dull, really repetitive, okay? But on the other hand, hopefully you can see that developing a motif is a great way to break out of just playing the same licks over and over. And of course, there's a ton more ways to develop a motif, but I think you get the idea, and of course you need to play around with it and experiment on your own. Okay, start with something simple and gradually expand upon it. The repetition, as you develop your theme or your motif, the repetition will give your solo a sense of cohesion, a sense of purpose. It'll definitely not sound like you're just noodling around. Okay? That's my motif. Now let's talk quickly about the second idea I had for you, which is incorporating a wide interval leap. Very often when we're utilizing our scales, and I think this is especially true when we're playing diatonic scales as opposed to pentatonic scales, we play in too much of what I call a linear fashion. You know, we play along the scale in consecutive notes like A to B to C to D to E. So I might do a passage like this going just what I said, A, B, C, D, E, and there's nothing wrong with that. I might do a passage like this. I'm going to go backwards now, C, B, A, G, F, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if we do it too much, it's going to sound very bland. It's actually going to sound clinical. It's almost going to start sounding like you're just kind of playing a scale exercise in a sense, instead of creating emotion, you know, creating a beautiful melody, which is what we really want to be doing. And I want to point out that even if I'm not literally just doing one note after another, you know, a fragment of a scale, you know, in sequence, even when the notes are very close to each other, like let's say I go, or, that's nice, but those notes are very, very close together, okay? And it's going to start to sound a little predictable and a little stale if that's all I do, you know? And even if I develop that idea a little further, You can see that I really went from the higher portion of the scale to the middle portion of the scale, more or less kind of sort of in sequence. Not a bad thing to do. It's really not a bad lick. Totally fine in moderation, but you don't want it to be all you do. Again, your playing is going to sound dull, lacking in imagination, clinical, whatever words you want to use. To break out of that, what I sometimes like to do is, instead of playing notes that are right next to each other, A, B, C, D, E, or C, B, A, G, F, whatever, I might, in the course of my solo, or to start my solo off, or to help me find a nice melody, a nice motif, or a theme to develop, I might grab a starting note and then play another note that is a ways away from that starting note. So for example, if I hit this A note right here, instead of going directly down to G and then maybe down to F, whatever, or maybe from the A going up to B, up to C from there, instead, I'll maybe go a perfect fifth away from A to E, okay? A to E, and that is the interval that we call a perfect fifth. We're going A, B, C, D, E, 5 notes. By the way, very quickly, if you want to explore this idea of intervals on a much, much deeper level, I do have a video on that. I'm going to put the link to that video in the description below, okay? But getting back to my wide interval leap, I'm going to hit the A note and jump all the way up to E. And at that point, honestly, I just got to listen and ask myself, where does this melody want to go? And of course, the possibilities are literally infinite. But just by doing that wide interval leap, in this case from the A to the E, I'm keeping my playing from sounding too linear, too much like I'm just playing a scale. Now, earlier in the video, you remember I said there's some overlap between a wide interval leap and developing a motif. Here's what I mean. That wide interval leap that I just mentioned can itself be the foundation of a motif. The wide interval leap can be the starting point for the motif. So in the next backing track, I'm going to take the same chord sequence. Remember, it was A minor to F to C to G. And I'm actually going to do 2 wide interval leaps. The first pass through the chord sequence, I'm going to start by going A to E like I demonstrated a moment ago. And in the second pass through, I'm going to start by going from that E note that I was on, okay, from the E note to a high C note, like that, E to C. And I'm going to try to find a motif to develop off that E to C. By the way, if you're curious, E to C is the interval of what we call a minor sixth. Okay, and that's a pretty wide interval. We're counting E, F, G, A, B, C. 6 notes. That's my sixth, E to C. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to do my best to develop 2 motifs, both of which I find by starting off with a wide interval leap. Here we go. So there we are. Now, for purposes of this video, demonstrating the ideas and the concepts, I really kept my playing very, very simple. But hopefully you can see that a motif can be developed in any number of ways. And hopefully you're also seeing and hearing that a wide interval leap is a great way to start off developing a motif. Now, I do want to point out, though, a wide interval leap does not necessarily have to lead to a motif, okay? You can just incorporate wide interval leaps into your soloing, and like I said, they'll keep it from sounding too linear. Not every interval leap has to turn into a repeating motif, okay? Sometimes you just go with a wide interval leap and just go in whatever direction from there. Maybe I could have gone that same E to C, and that's a nice melody. Again, I didn't have to develop that as a motif. I can just play it as a simple melodic passage. And that's kind of nice, okay? So again, the use of intervals and or wide interval leaps can help you to break out of repeating the same patterns over and over. And as I've said, this can give your leads a greater sense of purpose. Furthermore, remember that a wide interval leap does not necessarily have to be developed into a motif. It can just give you a nice starting melody and then you just go from there, okay? Please remember, as I said earlier, a solo should be like a song within a song, a composition within a composition, okay? That mindset is going to keep you from just noodling around aimlessly, okay? All right, that's all I have for you today. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, please hit the subscribe button. I really do believe we are building a community here. There's a ton of content already here, and there's more content coming all the time. So please hit subscribe and be a part of this amazing guitar journey. And also, please leave me a comment. I always say, you know, even if you happen to disagree with me or feel that I've left something out, we can have a discussion about it, and that discussion will benefit and enrich all of our respective guitar journeys. Thanks so much. Have a great day.